Welcome to Mastering the Fixed Asset Lifecycle. I'm your speaker, Angela Bolton, Senior Product Manager and Strategist for Sage Fixed Assets. Today, I'm going to take you along a journey with a little bit of a personal connotation because I feel like when we do a little personal journey along with our fixed asset journey, it actually sticks together a lot more cohesively. So over the past 27 years, I've been in fixed assets. Yeah, that's a really long time. And at the same time, I've also been spending many years doing deep personal work outside of that. And what I've come to realize as of late, which is quite interesting to me, when I reflect back on my career and where I am today, I see that they are no different from each other. In fact, they mirror each other quite the same. So let's start with the phrase that we all know and see what it's really asking us to manage within our own self as well. Cradle to grave. This is something that we hear all the time within fixed assets. From an audit and compliance perspective, we are responsible for the entire life cycle, not just the depreciation piece that we're all thinking about when we think fixed assets. Oh, I need to depreciate and find a better way outside of my spreadsheet to manage my fixed asset depreciation. There's so much more to the life's journey than just depreciation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So if the full journey is the responsibility, then the mastery itself starts with how we think about that journey as a whole. So why life cycle thinking really matters? If we think about it, there are three pillars to our life and to the journey of fixed assets. There's visibility, control, and defensibility. When we can see clearly and make intentional decisions based on these things, these pillars, and understand our path, then things start to stabilize, not only for fixed assets, but also in ourselves. So let's put that into a simple map and the life cycle we're all trying to manage. The life cycle starts with the very beginning. This is what we're going to talk about is the full journey and how each phase has risks, controls, and decision points along the entire process. From the beginning through the work in progress, because we're all a work in progress, down to the value in which we hold and assets, how we make the change throughout the entire life cycle, down to retirement and when we're done. So this is the full journey. And this journey isn't defined by milestones, but it's shaped by how we manage the moments between them and how we manage the transitions that take us from step to step to step. Where organizations really struggle the most is when transactions aren't clear and risk quietly takes hold. And where that risk takes hold is in between each one of these little sections along this jagged line. But there's also polarity to everything we do. And so where you might see this as a risk, you could also say is I see opportunity to improve. These are the events where the attention should be going. And where does this start? It starts in accounting, where the data entry of the fixed asset begins. In the APPO, how is it getting entered in? Are we entering in the invoice properly? Are we giving it a real description? Is it too vague for the next person to take on and understand? And so forth. And from there, we then take that data entry, the transactional pieces of that, and put it into construction in progress, or work in progress, as I like to say as well. This is where the journey really stalls, but the work really takes hold of the next chapter, our next transition, because CIP is where the assets sit and still while they're being created to then go into the next piece that everyone talks about, which is depreciation. We're going to talk a lot about the CIP aspect because this is where risk but opportunity lies the most within the journey of a fixed asset. Then we go into the manual depreciation. A lot of us start this journey thinking, I need to move off my spreadsheet for an internal depreciation, which is straight line. Everything can do straight line, meaning every ERP can do straight line. Spreadsheets can do straight line. My 7-year-old can do straight line in his head. No, for real. So what we really talk about is the tax depreciation piece of that. All these federal multi-book, multi-transactions, calculations, the rules that are embedded in the system. I'm not talking about you need to know how, and you should need to know how to create a tax depreciation method. No, that should be based on rules that are generated and embedded in a system. And this is where also too much of this stuff is handled manually instead of supported by a system. So then we move along into the inconsistent or missing process. And this is also where we have to look at the roadmap, meaning everyone navigates this journey differently. And who plays this role? Your community. So the community of everyone who needs to be involved will also dive deep into that. Then once we get there, we start looking at reporting because at the end of the day, every data piece that we get into a software is because we want to get it out of the software for reporting, right? We want to get our data in to automate it, just to export it back out into various file formats. But are they standardized? Is everyone reporting differently but the same thing? And throughout your community, everyone has their own idea of what needs to be reported and shown. Then we move along the journey, and then we talk about these disconnected systems. The path is broken. Vital information is not getting passed from one place to the next, to the next, to the next, within our community, within our systems and our solutions. And then what happens to assets when they're fully retired and they need to get off the books or they need to be sold? That's where the journey should end, but it's hardly ever acknowledged or closed off. If the gaps are where those risks are hidden along the way, all these different touch points, again, I cannot stress enough, this is where we have opportunities for change. So if the gaps are where the risk hides, the next step to strengthen is the earliest part of the journey, because foundations decide our outcomes in everything, our life, as well as the fixed asset journey. So let's start at the beginning, because early structure shapes everything we see downstream. So let's start with the birth of an asset. Or also, I like to think pottery. My oldest daughter is in pottery. She has lots of things you have to consider before you even start putting that clay on the wheel. And this is where early decisions matter on everything we do, not just fixed assets, not just pottery, not just our life, every single thing. We always have to stop, think, be aware of these early decisions, right? Every single asset has a beginning, and early decisions matter because they shape its life cycle. They also shape its control, which creates good policy, and good policy creates what? Consistent decisions. And what gets included, excluded, and how it's defined along the road is so super important. And like in life, early structure shapes everything else that follows. So we're talking about budgeting and approvals, capitalization decisions and thresholds. Thresholds meaning, do we capitalize everything that's over $25,000 and then expense everything under? Or when does that threshold happen for us? And who's making those determinations? Who's approving those assets that shape those lives of the journey? Financial compliance considerations, and again, always require documentation. But most assets don't show up finished. What? They show up as something being built. Work in progress, construction in progress, CIP. Before anything even delivers value, it's a work in progress. We are all a work in progress. We can't deliver value if we don't take care of ourselves either. It's the same thing. So costs built over time, things that aren't in service yet, things that are still being built across our community through facilities, through accounting, through project management, through FP&A, they all require structure to track and managing these. So each project is just a chapter. It's not the whole story along the journey. And without structure, things tend to drift off to the side. And that's where we start to find problems. And here's why CIP matters so much, because it really truly is the highest risk zone in the total journey of its life. Here are the risk areas, okay? Now, cost sits too long. We've seen that before. We see it all the time, or it doesn't get pushed and corrected, and it doesn't get solidified. And no project ownership. I see this a lot over the last 27 years with CIP intense organizations where there's no real ownership. And that's because we don't have systems in place. We don't have the approvals that we talked about earlier. All of these things add up. We don't have that foundation. So then what happens is we get incomplete data along the entire process of those projects, or it's not even standardized, which also tends to be a problem when we start moving that asset into being placed in service for depreciation. And what happens when that on all these other pillars start to come into fold is we get reports that don't reconcile. Or our reports, if we don't have a system in place, our reports aren't reconciling to FP&A's reports, to Treasury's reports, to any tax reports that are they're trying to forecast, trying to look at the budget for this year, next year, 3 years ahead. We just don't have that reconciliation going on. And what happens then is the biggest part is delayed in capitalization. So CIP is where things are being built, which is also the highest risk because of all these factors we see in front of us. But without ownership and visibility, things sit, they stall, or they get lost along the process, which I've also seen many times when people are using spreadsheets as templates. Like in life, when we don't actually engage with what we're building or taking that action forward to make sure that we're doing everything we need to make sure that these things get taken care of, it doesn't move forward the way we think it will. So let's turn that into a simple discipline. How do we keep the journey moving forward on purpose with structure? First, we have clear criteria, regular review cadence. How often are we reviewing this? Are we reviewing this information weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis? If you're high intensity CIP, we should have eyes on this at least once a week because there's so many different factors, especially if you have so many different projects and so many different people to reach out to within your community, your team. So we have to define these triggers. These triggers are really big things that, again, are part of that foundation we went to earlier. So cross-functional community members like FP&A, tax, project management, facilities, state and local tax if we have that internally, internal, external auditors, maybe third-party CPAs, and the list could go on. That's why fixed assets is a journey, not just depreciation. Progress does not happen by accident. It happens through taking that action through intentional checkpoints. Just like in our daily lives, things don't happen to me by accident. I actually have to take action with intention in order to reach that goal. It's the same thing here. But here we also have to bring in all the players of our community to make sure that we're going through those checkpoints in streamlining everything along the way. And once that asset has crossed that threshold from being built to ready to use, then everything starts to change. Then we move into what everyone knows is place of service. And this is where the true value of your asset begins. There will always be a moment where something shifts from being built to actually delivering value. And that's what we're talking about. And this moment is where organizations don't feel the issues immediately. Why? Because they feel it a lot later. If we don't have the foundation, if we don't have all the community members involved, then what happens is if we're just focused on depreciation down the road, we get all these questions about where did this asset come from? What project was this part of? Did we get all of the costs in there? Where are the invoices? Who approved all these things? If we don't have that, then we will feel this later down the road. So we're going to walk through some of these cross-functional alignment issues. This is where we saw on that jagged roadmap. AP costs, are they entered correctly? Are they entered with all the right information? Projects completion status. Are these projects getting completed? Are they not? Where are we doing touch points with our community members to make sure that we're completing the projects or extending the projects and getting approval to extend these projects, to even closing and canceling projects that don't have any more further movement or just don't make sense anymore because something else happened over here. So we have fixed asset record creation, the ERP integration, how we're moving this data from point to point, and then of course reporting. This is where handoffs are so important and requires alignment within your community along this journey. And when things aren't aligned, the issues don't show up immediately. They show up a lot later, like we just talked about. This area is where breakdowns happen if systems and processes aren't aligned accordingly with the foundations. Now we hit the part everyone expects, but we're going to reframe it in a completely different way. Depreciation isn't about loss. It's about allocation. It's about accurately reflecting how value is consumed over time across multiple books. Okay. Tax depreciation considerations are a big one here because there's different timing within tax rules. There's bonus depreciation with different years leading up to 2025 and beyond. There's Section 179 limitations, there's auto limitations, there's multi-state different things, there's ADS. You're thinking and your clients are thinking, gosh, I'm just thinking of straight line depreciation. That's the biggest misconception of a fixed asset journey anyone could place on any organization. Okay. Why would you take all the time and effort of implementation and trying to find a system or a process and change within your organization to improve upon the whole journey of this life cycle if we're not thinking about the rest of our community, like how does tax departments use our schedules? What if we have to do ADS? How are we taking care of it for multi-state if we're in multi-states for different jurisdictions? Are we taking into consideration budgeting for upcoming projects we want to do or to retire and replace these assets? Are we thinking about property tax? Are we thinking about insurance valuations and replacement values for our assets? If we're taking all this time and energy and money into putting it into a system, why are we not putting all our efforts into putting everything into one source record for us to view from a high-end holistic viewpoint? then everyone wins, right? So change does not equal failure. Remember that, because I know there's a lot of us out there that don't like change, but it doesn't equal failure, and it actually equals movement, evolution, reality, and opportunity. So if depreciation itself isn't the hard part, then why do so many organizations struggle? Because of the things we just said. This is where the things really break down, is spreadsheet dependency, or I'm in finance and I just want to take care of my straight line depreciation in my ERP because it integrates, and forget about the rest of my community matters. No, manual reconciliations, that's what happens there, is across multi-data streams. So if I'm in finance and I'm just taking care of my straight line depreciation in my internal book, but I'm not including tax, FP&A, states, a third-party CPA firm, audit, if we're not including everyone in that conversation, then other people are doing manual reconciliations across different data streams. So then we also have lack of integration and automated workflows that move things for us, to take out those tedious tasks that we don't want to do or that we're tired of doing, that leaves risk for audit and also leaves risk for errors along the journey. And then also missing documentation, which is also all these things that we've already talked about, leads to inadequate reporting. So when systems rely on memory of some other person who's sitting there at a desk instead of a structured environment, this is where the risk really multiplies. And these are the root causes between all audit findings. Because what does audit checklists look like? It goes in and looks at all the things that are touched manually, that aren't integrated, that aren't cross-functional, that aren't shared and standardized, that aren't automated workflow processes. That's what audit looks at. And so anything that doesn't match those key foundations and pillars are going to be an audit risk. And almost always there's a hidden risk underneath all of these things. I want to talk about for a second the hero risk, right? The tribal knowledge, because there's lack of documentation, there's no standard process for any of these reportings, these processes along the journey. There's nobody talking to anybody. I literally had a customer one time, the tax was here and finance was here, and they were emailing me to talk about what tax wanted or finance wanted. And I said, I know that you're both in the same office right now. Why don't you just knock on the door? These are the things I'm talking about that are really, really happening. And so ask yourself, is that happening within my organization? And if that's the case, you don't want one heroic person that's holding it all together. That one person who's doing the research, who's doing the straight line, but not talking to anybody else. Or they are, but there's no process defined. There's nothing written. They always hold it together until they can't, because what happens? Turnover in accounting departments happen more over than not. They get let go, they get replaced, they retire, or the organization restructures and now they're no longer part of that process. They're somewhere else in the organization doing something else. When processes aren't clear, organizations don't stop. What do? They improvise. We don't want that. This is where inconsistency really materializes and keeps moving forward. This is what grows in the space between the milestones. Okay. This is why so many teams feel stuck. And even when they're working so hard to meet the end goal, this is where they get stuck. And this is what happens. We get inconsistent reporting. Everyone's running amok. Delayed close times and cycles. I see so much when we don't have all those foundations in place, and we get increased audit exposure over and over, which means it gets really costly, doesn't it? Because the more the auditor has to look, or the more the employee or the person working on fixed assets journey, wherever it is taking more time because they're in reactive mode, not in proactive mode. And we want to get proactive so it doesn't cost us time and money and errors. So reporting is historical versus operational insight is what we would talk about at this point, because organizations feel stuck when they have no clear direction or shared awareness of what's happening within their data. Their missing processes creates improvisation, the reactive instead of proactive, which also creates inconsistency and erosion. It also creates a sense of untrust, right? I can't trust this data because I don't trust that it's getting put in correctly. And that's a huge thing too that people often forget about, is the trust in their data. If we don't take these steps, we can't truly say we trust in our data 90 to 98%. That's pretty high. There's hardly any time that we can really truly trust our data 100%, being in software for my entire life, but we can get pretty close. But if we don't have all these things in place, the structure, then we can't say that. So here's the shift. Controls aren't red tape. They are how we create a crystal clear and a very solid straight path, which leads us to controls, governments, and again, our community. Now we embed the structure into the journey so it becomes repeatable. And this is what mastery starts to look like. Controls across the life cycle. So the journey leads, the follow supports, and these controls whisper. They're embedded controls like capitalization approval, CIP reviews, in-service validation, depreciation checks along the way, reporting standardization across our entire community, and then the retirement and sale, and the authorization for accountability and audit readiness. And when systems talk to each other, people don't have to compensate. Because integration, if we have ERP integration with all of this journey along the whole path, we have fewer handoffs to different people, we have fewer gaps, and this protects our data integrity and our community. It gets us to that trust of our data. Integration eliminates duplication and it strengthens that data integrity. So let's close the loop because the end of the journey matters just as much as the rest of it that we've been talking about. Retirement or a sale. Physical inventories are often ignored, but they really, really matter when it comes down to compliance, property tax, accuracy of our data. I just talked to someone who's been in business for over 40 years and they've never done a physical inventory. And guess what? They're multi-state, they're multi-country. They have no idea what they have. And when looking at their register, it's pretty clear that they don't. Assets no longer exist, but they're working. They should not live forever on your books, okay? When they live forever on your books, property tax, insurance, it also looks on our books like we've inflated or deflated. We really have to take a look at our assets. Many times too, even if we've done a physical inventory, we may have seen something because maybe we had a temp do it. We hired someone in just to go do it, or a third party, or we did it. We didn't know what we were talking about because we didn't have a plan and process. And we go out there and we see assets that aren't being used and we deem them as disposed. But then a couple years later, we do it again. It's in working condition. And now we have to go back and backdate the disposal and bring it back to life. That happens all the time. And the reverse is also true. So the endings deserve just as much attention as the beginnings. Assets that no longer exist, again, should not live on the books forever. Clean it up. You have compliancy implications across multi-jurisdictions. You could be overpaying, underpaying for insurance, which is a big deal these days because insurance keeps escalating and it's not going to stop. And again, that financial accuracy that we're all striving for. Because when we don't close that loop, we literally pay for it. The cost of not closing that loop is huge. We have overstated assets, overpayments, underinsured, which is a bummer if we have something happen to our business and we can't recapture and restart business. We might have to close. I've seen that happen many times. Unfinished business creates so much confusion. So we don't want that to happen, okay? And so what does mastery actually mean? What mastery really means is this. It's not about knowing more. It's about seeing the whole picture clearly. Holistically is what I always say, from the cradle all the way to the grave. When the life cycle is understood, managed, respected, everything naturally improves on its own. Everything. Like we talked about at the beginning, it's thinking through it. It is taking that action. So we set the intention and then we took the action to make it happen. And then what happens, it just naturally flows perfectly. It's awareness, right? So stop, look around, be aware, reflect, like I've been doing lately a lot, and see how nothing is different between what we do and how we move through our life versus the fixed asset journey from the beginning to having this foundation, to taking the action with these intentions to make sure that we're bringing our community, we're bringing everything back to center, we're standardizing things, we're closing those risks into opportunities and seeing the joy in it. And then mastery lasts when the systems support the journey. Mastery is sustainable when the system supports the journey. When we understand the journey, we manage it so much better, whether it's assets or ourselves. And here's what it looks like when the system actually supports the life cycle. Now, this slide is a little busy only because it needs to be, because this is the journey. This is the true journey. It starts at the ERP APPO transactions. It moves through construction and progress. It goes into project reporting. What does that look like? Are we on budget? Are these assets coming into service soon? And then when they come in service, we're depreciating for all books. I capitalize all on purpose. It's not just about straight line. It's about all the different books across all the different sectors, even ADS. And some people even use it for EMP, which is awesome. Earnings and profits, for those who don't know that acronym. Then we move to the community reporting, and I put community reporting, not just reporting, because again, fixed assets touches so many different areas of a business. And we want to make sure that everyone's getting the reports they need through this one source system, which then also goes back to the general ledger. There's adjustments that happen within the assets, just like in our lives. Just because we move through each chapter doesn't mean there's something that needs adjusted along its way. So we always have those. We have to make sure that whatever system we're putting in place allows those adjustments to occur, because if it doesn't, it creates a whole mess and a nightmare, and then we start losing the data integrity again. We start going from 98% trust down to 50, and that's not where we want to be. Because when we trust our data, we also go through compliance and audit readiness. We're ready for tackle any question that comes our way. We have the data, we have the history. We're doing our physical inventories, ensuring that our data that's there is there. And then we're doing maintenance on our data and staying in the same place. We all have one record. So that at the end of the day, when we retire it, sell it, dispose of it, then we're all ready. And we follow this process just perfectly. So bringing the life cycle together with Sage Fixed Assets. This product has been around for so long. And why? Because it is so robust with federal tax compliance rules written and embedded in the system. There's no second guessing. There's no customization to the methods. They're there, they're in place. The warnings are there for you to walk you through the process so that you don't have to learn much to do it. We also have seamless front and back and center Sage intact integration between our products to make that workflow automated and seamless, which also brings us to the full robust CIP. This CIP is my absolute. People think, oh, Angie, you've been doing this, you must love the depreciation. I do, but where I really have fun and the creative energy really flows is in the CIP product, because this product is like no other on the market. Believe me, I've researched a bazillion years, it feels like, for this. And we are always making it so much more robust than anything out there on the market. So if you are CIP intensive, please check out the Sage Fixed Assets CIP module. It is my absolute favorite module. I have goosebumps talking about this particular software. But also think about multi-book calculations. When you're researching anything, you should always bring your community. That's mastery. Mastery isn't holding all the information to yourself. It's bringing your community, bringing in your team members, having that conversation, making sure that what we select is for everybody's use, not just our own. When we bring in the community, everything starts to transpire, connect the dots, and all of a sudden we have a beautiful stream of workflow and we get back to the trust. Every asset has a journey. Risk lives in the transitions of everything. But we also see that's where we have opportunities. Mastery comes from structure, visibility, intention, action. Move forward. Systems should carry the weight for us because that's what they're for, so that we don't have to do it ourselves. And this is how you sustain mastery in fixed assets. Not just implement it, but sustain it going forward. Master the journey, cradle to grave. Thank you.